Pythagorean Theorem. So this is specifically for right triangles. If it is not a right triangle, meaning one of the three angles is a 90-degree angle, then this equation won't work. So the equation is a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. A and b are the legs or the two line segments that form that right angle. So they're the two that are going to form the right angle. It doesn't matter which one's A or which one's B, because when you square them and add them, it's not going to make a difference. C, however, is your hypotenuse, and it's going to be the line that is directly opposite that right angle. So if this is my right angle, if I connected those two endpoints, my C is going to be that diagonal. It is always going to be the longest measurement. That's something to remember. Hypotenuse is always going to be your longest measurement, whether it looks like it's the diagonal piece or not. Okay? So for example 1, it says the foot of a ladder is placed 6 feet from a wall. The top of the ladder rests 8 feet up the wall. How long is the ladder? So let's draw a picture. If this is my wall, if my ladder rests 8 feet at the top, and it has to be 6 feet from the base, this is my length of my ladder. So when I plug this into my a squared plus b squared equals c squared, my c is my hypotenuse, that length that I don't know. So I would have 8 squared plus 6 squared is going to equal c squared. So now it's solving those pieces. 8 squared is going to give me 64. 6 squared is going to give you 36. I still have my c squared. When I add these two together, I get 100 is equal to c squared. Here's where it gets a little tricky. I don't want to know what the value of c squared is. I just want to know what the value of c is. So the opposite of exponents is radicals. So the opposite of raising it to a power is doing the square root. So I'm going to square root both sides. So when I square root the c squared, I get just a c. And when I square root 100, I get 10. So the length of my ladder then is going to be 10 feet long. For example 2, says it's similar to the one above. The bottom of a ladder must be placed 3 feet from a wall. If the ladder is 12 feet long, how high up the wall does it touch? So it's set up a little bit differently. I know that my distance from the wall, if this is my wall, distance from the wall is 3 feet. I know that the length of my ladder is going to be 12 feet, but I don't know how high up that wall it's going to touch. So now, if this is my right angle, my opposite is the 12, so I know that that's my c value. So if I have my a squared plus b squared equals c squared, I know that 12 is my c, so I would have 12 squared. And 3 can be a or b, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to put it in for a, so I have 3 squared plus, I don't know my x, so I'm going to replace it with an x squared. You can keep it a, b, and c, or you can use whatever variable they give you in the problem. Just don't lose track of what you're actually trying to solve for. So now when I solve everything, 3 times 3 is going to give me 9. I still have my x squared. It's equal to 12 times 12 is going to give me 144. So now I have to rearrange to get this x squared by itself so that I can do my square rooting. So I'm going to have to subtract 9 from both sides, because 9 minus 9 is going to give me 0, so I'm left with my x squared. 144 minus 9 is going to give me 135. Now, my final step is always going to be to square root both sides. So the square root of x squared is going to simply be x. The square root of 135 is going to be about 11.6. So it's going to reach about 11.6 feet up the wall. That's where that top of the ladder is going to come to rest. We have 3 more examples. So I have a baseball diamond is a square with side lengths of 90 feet. What is the distance to the nearest tenth? So this time it's telling you they want the nearest tenth of a foot from first to third base. So if this is my home, I go from home to first, or I come from third to home. So it's saying that each of these are 90 feet. They want to know if you take a direct run from first to third, which we don't do, but if they were, they want to know what that distance is going to be. So since it's the one opposite my right angle, that's my C. I don't know this piece. I know that A is 90 squared and B is 90 also. So when I square both of them, I get 8100 plus 8100 is going to equal C squared. 8100 plus 8100 is going to give me 116,200 is equal to C squared. Again, the last step you're always going to do is square root both sides. So your C is going to equal 127.3 because I'm rounding it to that nearest tenth place. And again, your unit in this one is going to be feet because that's how we measured it before, saying that we wanted it to a tenth of a foot. For example 4, it says Donna's TV is 20 inches long with a diagonal measure of 25 inches. How wide is her TV? So if we think about a TV, it says that it has a 20 inches long, so my length is 20. It says that it has a diagonal measure, so I need to create a diagonal line. Go from one corner to its opposite. I can form my right angle. And the diagonal is 25 inches. I want to know how wide it is. So I don't need this extra half of my TV in order to find this piece. So I know that since 25 is opposite my right angle, that's my C. So I have 25 squared. It doesn't matter if 20 is your A or your B, so I'm going to write 20 squared plus x squared. Again, now I'm going to solve for both of these pieces, so 20 squared is going to give me 400 plus my x squared. 25 squared is going to give you 625. Now I need to solve for my x squared, which means I need to get rid of my 400. When I subtract 400 from both pieces, I get x squared is going to equal 225. And the last thing I need to do is square root both sides. So x is going to be 15 inches. So her TV is 15 inches wide and 20 inches long with that diagonal of 25 inches. And the last kind of problem, this is why at the beginning I said that your hypotenuse is always the longest measure, because it wants to know, do these dimensions form a right triangle? So we know in order for it to form a right triangle, a squared plus b squared has to be the same as c squared. So the first thing you need to do is find which of these 3 units or measurements is going to be your hypotenuse. Since the longest one is always your hypotenuse, that's going to be my 12. So 4 feet and 8 feet are your A and B. So if I have 4 squared plus 8 squared is 12 squared, this is going to give me 16. This is going to give me 64. And 12 squared will give me 144. When I add those together, I get 80 equals 144. Since this is not a true statement, this is going to be not a right triangle. Now I'm going to do an extra example to show you how it would look if you did have dimensions for a right triangle. So if I said I had 5 centimeters, 3 centimeters, and 4 centimeters, again, the first thing you need to do is figure out which one's your hypotenuse. Your hypotenuse is always the longest, so that's my C. So I'm going to have 3 squared plus 4 squared is going to equal that 5 squared. So now, when I find those squared values, I get 9 plus 16 is going to equal 25. 9 plus 16 is 25, and 25 is equal to 25. So this one does work out, so this would be a right triangle. Again, the key is to remember that in order for it to be a right triangle, the sum of the squares of the leg has to equal the square of your hypotenuse. If they're off by even a decimal value, it is not a right triangle.